Here's a picture of Alex Trocchi, scanned from the cover of one of his books. When I returned from Canada in December 1965, the country had subtly changed. There was less respect for authority and deference to it. This was most apparent to doctors. When he became Home Secretary, Roy Jenkins had instructed the Metropolitan Police to treat everyone equally. Family doctors were among the first to bear the Maoist brunt and started being treated as if they were anyone else. They were harassed for parking safely but illegally when visiting patients. The police argued that anyone could put a notice on their car saying they were a doctor. The BMA was obliged to issue cumbersome special badges. Before I went to Canada in 1963, such conduct would not have been tolerated. In the old days, the police knew the doctors on their patch. It was simple local intelligence, familiar to the traditional Doc Green style of policing. Jenkins discarded the timeless as being old-fashioned, and slowly the police became the enemies of society rather than its friends. This marked the beginning of the breakdown of order and the rule of law. It was, of course, Roy Jenkins who planned the black market in drugs. Soon after I started prescribing cannabis, I had a strange encounter with him. One day in 1967, before he became Chancellor of the Exchequer, he conspired with a mutual friend to arrange a cocktail party to which we were both invited. I had no idea he would be there, and we were never actually introduced. But in a social waltz, his sidekick engaged me in conversation about drugs within earshot, while Jenkins himself appeared to be chatting up a girl standing beside me. Out of the corner of my eye, I could see him taking sidelong glances through his rose-coloured spectacles over the rim of his claret. It would have been clear that I lacked the necessary revolutionary fervour. For my part, I diagnosed a devious and manipulative character. I suspect it was he who ordered the assassination of my character by slandering me as an insane, drug-dependent poof. Some months later, the police who viewed my prescribing as driving a coach and horses through the law threatened to get me. It was by prescribing cannabis that I became acquainted with comrades among the Sloane Rangers of Chelsea. One evening after a dinner party, one of the group took me upstairs to hatch eagles in the loft, as he put it. He was hoping I might collaborate with plans to turn on Prince Charles. I diplomatically declined. The Sloanes later succeeded with Diana, but not with cannabis. They encouraged her to renounce protocol and wear her heart on her sleeve. Over the years, as I gathered more intelligence, I learned that in the early days of talking films, Lenin himself had ordered the party members in Hollywood to surreptitiously insert snippets of propaganda into every film, hidden within the lines of the performers. As Goebbels later pointed out, good propaganda should be entertaining. By dramatizing the American dream, the dreams not only of Americans but also less prosperous societies around the world were stimulated. In many places, particularly Africa, this promoted discontent with local leaders, sowing seeds of revolution. Another fellow I met was William Burroughs, the writer. In the early 70s, I visited him every few weeks and formed the opinion that he was an observer of the scene like myself. As I pieced together ever more morsels of intelligence, it became clear that the roots of the hippie subculture of California lay in the popular philosophy of individual freedom expressed by Jack Kerouac in his book On the Road. Along with Kerouac, Ginsberg and others, Burroughs had been one of the founder members of the Beat movement. This had spawned the Beatniks in the late 50s, tellingly so called after the then recently launched Russian Sputniks. The comrades encouraged them to smoke cannabis and take LSD, so that beatniks became hippies. Timothy Leary then encouraged them to turn on, tune in, and drop out. Thus it was by the strategy of adding psychedelic drugs to beat philosophy that the revolutionary socialists made the inspiration for the swinging 60s appear to originate in California rather than Moscow. The most sinister person to seek acquaintance was Harvey Matusow. He was so shadowy that most people have never heard of him. His cover was as an actor and a podgy buffoon who played the Jew's harp. But he had a devious and manipulative personality behind his bonhomie. He told me that he'd been born in Brooklyn and gone to California as a lad to seek his fortune. There he was employed as an operator on the switchboard at the headquarters of the Los Angeles Communist Party. Later he got caught up in the McCarthy purges and sent to prison for 4 years. In 1968, 69 and 70, he invited me to meet him socially. On the first occasion it was at his house in Chiswick. By 1969 he lived in Essex, and I stayed overnight. Then again in 1970 he arranged a concert with a glass orchestra he had created in Gillingham, where I was by then practicing. Since he and I had absolutely nothing in common, I saw little point in these meetings, but humoured him to try and understand his motives. Looking back, he was trying to assess the effect the assassination of my character was having on me and whether I still posed a threat to the revolution. There was a Time Watch programme about him on BBC Two in the early 90s. It was only then that I learned that it was Harvey Matusow who had ultimately destroyed Senator McCarthy in America in 1954. Matusow affected to betray the communist cause by testifying to the Senate committee about conversations he had overheard as a switchboard operator. He grossly exaggerated the communist threat and the number of people involved. Senator McCarthy believed him and made a complete fool of himself. The anti-communist agenda was destroyed. Matusow had been imprisoned for perjury. It was not just a penny that dropped. A jackpot of pennies clattered through my mind as the true extent of Soviet subversion became clear. The effect of discrediting Senator McCarthy was to completely open up America to the comrades. Boggling though it may seem, by 1955, the United States had covertly become a Soviet satellite culturally. This explains why totalitarian notions of political correctness, for example, appear to come from America rather than Russia. Here is a picture of Harvey Matusow that I took from an album he gave me.